Good afternoon, everyone. We are here to wave the American flag and all that it stands for. We're so proud of so many of our members who have taken this fight for our democracy to the floor of the House and across the country. I want to salute in particular Chairman John Sarbanes, who has been such a leader over the years in fighting for our democracy. We'll hear from him momentarily. Zoe Lofgren, the chair of the Committee of Jurisdiction, House Administration Committee, who's worked so hard on this legislation. You'll hear from them and other members, but I also want to acknowledge Terry Sewell, who has an important part of this bill in H.R. 4, which is the Voting Rights Act, an important part of that. So here we are, set on the floor. This reminds me of what it must have felt like at Valley Forge. Everything is at stake. We must win this race, this fight for this bill, because at the same time as we are gathering here to honor our democracy across the country, over 200 bills are being put together, provisions are putting forth to suppress the vote. To suppress the vote, how could it be? How do we pledge allegiance to the flag in this capital, this temple of democracy, while at the same time supporting voter suppression across the country? So what we are doing in this fight that we're engaged in is to empower the people. This is called the For the People bill. And in doing so, we combat big, dark, special interest money in politics and amplify the voice of the American people. We fight foreign interference in our elections. Foreign interference in our elections. We expand voting rights. We fight political gerrymandering, and we crack down on corruption. The bill, as Mr. Sarbanes says, caffeinates every other issue because it gives people confidence that if we come down on the side of the people's interest, not the special interest, we will be able to have policies that are for the people. Policies to help us build back better, to end a pandemic and address economic disparities, end gun violence, and by promoting gun violence prevention, which we hope to do shortly, to have a national reckoning on racial injustice and to address the surging climate crisis, just to name a few issues that are affected, and again, to raise the minimum wage, just to address a few issues that are affected by big, dark money weighing in the Capitol. So today, members of Congress will have a choice. They will have a choice to vote for the people's interest and expanding the voices of the American people, or to vote with the special interest and further empowering big, dark money, which suffocates the system. The person who has done so much to give us that choice today is the chair of the task force that brings us this For the People, H.R. 1, of primary importance to us, John Sarbanes from the great state of Maryland. Mr. Sarbanes.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Thank you for designating the For the People Act, H.R. 1, and thank you for entrusting this caucus to assemble a transformative set of democracy reforms that we can give to the American people. Over the last few years, we know, you know, the people have become deeply cynical about politics and government. They don't see their voice represented in the system. They've said to us, first, we want to get to the ballot box every 2 years without having to run an obstacle course. Whether you're Republican, Democrat, or Independent, you just want to be able to cast your vote in America and have that be easy and convenient and straightforward. We address that in H.R. 1. They said to us, when you get to Washington, act right, behave, be ethical, be accountable, be transparent. And we have a whole set of reforms in H.R. 1 that would do that. And they pleaded with us, don't get tangled up in the money. Remember where you came from. Remember who you work for. Fight for our interests, for the public interest, not for the special interests and the big money. And we have a set of robust reforms that pushes back against the influence of big money. H.R. 1 is designed to restore the voices of Americans who felt left out and locked out for too long. We are excited about the opportunity before us. We are going to push as hard as we can to get this over the finish line. That begins today here in the House with the passage of H.R. 1. And now it's my pleasure to introduce the person who's done more than anybody in terms of the brass tacks of pulling this bill together, getting it through the House, getting it onto the floor. Zoe Lofgren, the chair of the House Administration Committee. Thank you, Zoe.
Thank you, John. We would not be here today without John Sarbanes and Speaker Pelosi, and that we are here today is extremely important. You know, in this face of the pandemic, a lot of jurisdictions made it easier for people to vote. They engaged in no excuse absentee voting. They engaged in early voting. And what did we see? The largest number of Americans voting in modern history. More Republicans voted, more Democrats voted, and you know who won? The American people won. Because when people participate and own their own government, that's what we need in our country. So H.R. 1 really is to preserve the opportunity for people to vote. After that enormous turnout, we saw Republican legislatures all over the country try and stop that voting, to stop the absentee voting, to impose barriers, to make it harder for Americans to vote. H.R. 1 would put a stop to that. And it's absolutely essential because nothing else happens unless the people's voices are heard. We are not going to address climate change unless the American people get to vote. We're not going to have a $15 an hour minimum wage unless the American people get to vote. So I hope that for all their cynical arguments against it, some of our friends across the aisle will get a grip and understand that it is in everyone's interest when all Americans have the chance to cast their vote and choose their own government. At this point, I would like to recognize someone who was elected for the seat held by our beloved John Lewis. The first 300 pages of this bill were written by John Lewis, and Congresswoman Williams is now representing his district.
In my home state of Georgia, Republican state legislators have unleashed an unprecedented torrent of voter oppression schemes to make it incredibly hard to vote and to silence our voices, especially communities of color. As we saw in the 2020 election and in the 2021 runoff election, Georgians are not afraid to fight daily for what so many take for granted in this country, including the right to vote. But the sad part is, y'all, we shouldn't have to. No one should be subjected to the daily threats of their rights being taken away. H.R. 1, the For the People Act, would put a stop to the voter suppression that we're seeing being debated right now in Georgia by taking an aim at the institutional barriers to voting. H.R. 1 would also create a national standard for voter registration because your zip code should not determine your access to the ballot box. I'm proud to support H.R. 1 and uplift the voices of Georgians who are right now being silenced due to voter suppression. I'm also incredibly honored to support this bill because 300 pages of it were written by my friend, my predecessor, my mentor, Congressman John Lewis. And let me be clear, y'all. This bill is the good trouble that he fought for his entire life. Mr. Lewis authored Title I of H.R. 1, and his legacy graces the historic reform efforts in this bill. We must honor his legacy by passing this monumental legislation, and I am honored to be upholding his legacy today in Georgia's 5th Congressional District.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, let me say I'm out of Orange County, California, and if you want to have a lesson on voter suppression, come down to Orange County. We'll talk about it. A cup of coffee will get you about an hour's lecture. But today, I want to thank Madam Speaker, Mr. Sarbanes, and so many others that are standing here today for all the good work on free and fair elections. And all of you are going to listen to a lot of debate, a lot of discussion on H.R. 1, For the People bill. Let me break it down. 3 basic principles. Number 1, it guarantees that every American that has a legal right to vote can vote. Number 2, that every legally cast ballot is counted. And number 3, the reason we're sent to Washington to represent the people, to put the public interest ahead of special interest, and that means getting dark money out of this elections, and that means getting big money out of Washington. Not complicated, very simple. That is why the vote we're about to take is so historically important. Thank you very much. Let's restore confidence in our democracy, and let's pass H.R. 1 for the people. Thank you very much. And now I'd like to introduce my colleague from the great state of Alabama, Representative Sewell. Ma'am.
As the proud representative of Alabama's Civil Rights District, Birmingham, Montgomery, and Selma, it is my honor to be the lead sponsor of H.R. 4, the John Roberts Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, which along with H.R. 1 will restore democracy for the people. This Sunday, March 7th, we will commemorate Bloody Sunday. Our nation will reflect on the extraordinary sacrifices made by ordinary Americans in my hometown of Selma, Alabama. These foot soldiers were beaten. They shed a little blood on a bridge in Selma, daring to march for the right, the equal right to vote for all Americans. Never did I think that the cause for which our beloved colleague, Congressman John Lewis, and the foot soldiers, the cause for which they marched 56 years ago, the Voting Rights Act, would again require congressional action to restore its full protections. This reminds us that progress is elusive, and every generation must fight and fight again. As we see in the state legislatures across this country, and even in a court case before the Supreme Court this week, the right to vote is under attack. We know that our democracy works best when everyone can participate fully. But we also know that voter suppression is alive and well. Old battles have become new again. The legacy of the foot soldiers like John Lewis requires that we pick up that baton, and the baton of voter access, the baton of voter equality, and we continue the next leg. Their cause is now our cause too. Progress is only made when we demand it, when we fight for it. John said, ours is not the struggle of one day, 1 week, or 1 year. Ours is a struggle for not just one judicial appointment or presidential term. Ours is a struggle for a lifetime, and each and every one of us must do our part. We in Congress, we leaders must lead, but every American must vote. We need to make sure that access to the ballot box is assured by everyone. As I close, I am reminded of John's last visit to the bridge. Every year we had an opportunity with John and Faith in Politics to go on a pilgrimage. John, last year was the 55th anniversary, and many of us didn't think he was going to attend, but he did. He did. John fights for what he believes in, and he stands up in times of good trouble. I want to remind all of our colleagues of his last call to action on that day. Stricken with cancer, John said, never give up, never give in. We must keep our eyes on the prize. We must pass H.R. 1 and H.R. 4 and truly restore democracy to America for the people.
Thank you, Congresswoman Sewell, because that inspiration will take us over the line. I am Teresa Leger Fernandez from the 3rd District of New Mexico. And I also want to thank the Speaker and Representative, where are they? They've gone. And Representative Sarbanes and Lofgren, because they have given us both the vision and the leadership. You know, Americans across the country, no matter their political affiliation, they just want a democracy that works, a democracy that values and empowers them. We should strive to be an example of democracy across the world, and that's exactly what For the People Act will do. You know, voting should be a celebration, right? It should be a celebration, not an endurance event where Black, Latino, and Native American voters need to wait for 6 to 8 hours just to vote. Increased voter participation should be all of our goals, Republicans and Democrats, because anything less is a violation of our democratic ideals. We must pass the For the People Act because, yes, we heard it, right? Democracy is where we start to inspire us to work on the issues that the people overwhelmingly support, like climate change, like lowering the cost of healthcare, and like building an inclusive society. So I want to just say muchísimas gracias to all of the leadership, to all of you who will be supporting us, and turn it over to my colleague, Representative Mondaire Jones from the great state of New York.
Today is a day of days. Thanks to the leadership of House Speaker Pelosi, Representatives Sarbanes and Lofgren, and all of my colleagues behind me, today we legislate for the people. This is a watershed moment in American history, and it is one that is deeply personal to me. Unlike many of the people we're used to seeing in our politics, I don't come from money or from a political family. I was raised by a young single mom who worked multiple jobs just to provide for us, and we still needed Section 8 housing and food stamps to get by. When I think back to the struggles of my family, they can be traced to one common cause, and that is our broken democracy. The reason healthcare, higher education, and housing are out of reach for so many millions of Americans is due to the fact that our democracy was not set up to reflect the will of everyday people. Independent redistricting commissions will help change that. When I ran for the United States Congress, political insiders came to me and they did not ask me what I would be campaigning on. They asked me, how much money could I raise? That is a shameful distortion of our democracy, and it must end. Public campaign financing will help change that. Many people were surprised when I defeated a billionaire who tried to purchase this congressional seat. My election should not be an exception to the rule. Rather, it should be the norm. When we pass H.R. 1, it will be. Thank you.
Mondaire, thank you, and thank all of my colleagues. And I want to thank this amazing caucus standing behind us. H.R. 1 is a collection of over 60 pieces of legislation introduced over a period of many, many years, assembled into an overarching package that can make a difference for the American people. The choice here is clear. You've heard it. You can win on the basis of your ideas and the programs that you put forward, which is what we choose to do. Or you can try to win by suppressing the vote, drawing unfair districts across the country, and using big money to spread disinformation. We choose to open up the ballot box. We choose fair districts that respect voters. We choose to fight for the public interest, not the special interest. And all of those things are none of those things are controversial. Everything I just mentioned is for the benefit, not exclusively of Democrats, but for the benefit of Democrats, Independents, and Republicans. That's what this is about. So we're excited today. We're excited about making progress. We're excited about H.R. 1, and we are ready to restore a government that is truly of, by, and for the people. Thank you all today for coming.
Blood